بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. طيب, those who answered the question, جزاكم الله خيرا. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inshallah reward you for this. And those who didn't answer, جزاكم الله خيرا. May Allah forgive you. And the other dua will be just in secret. Okay, so last time we started the second slides that we have about the fiqh, introduction to Islamic law. I think we finished half of the slides already. So the 10 principles of fiqh, fiqh and other branches of knowledge, fiqh and society, schools of fiqh, and we didn't talk about the non-madhabiyya yet. Okay, so I think we finished the ruling of learning ilm al-fiqh between being a personal obligation or a communal obligation, and then the topics of ilm al-fiqh, all these topics that usually ilm al-fiqh addresses and talks about, starting from the ibadat all the way to the politics and the international law. And we talked about the fiqh and other branches of knowledge, how it does interact with the other branches of knowledge, and then the fiqh and society. Talked about the urf and the customs of people. And then I think the last point was about the schools of fiqh and the way these schools were developed after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so if you remember last time, I think that was the last point when we talked about the story of Bani Qurayza, right? And then we had the two opinions of the Sahaba, then we discussed it here, and some people decided to pray on the way, some people decided to pray in Bani Qurayza. And I think we still have the two different opinions. Even among you yourselves perceived the concept differently, exactly as the companions of the Prophet ﷺ did. So that was an indication to what is going to happen after his death. ﷺ. So if the Sahaba disagreed during his lifetime, that means they will disagree after his death, right? And for sure, when new things and new matters come up to people, and new issues just happen every now and then, people will need to find out what is the Islamic ruling towards these things. So that was the way the fiqh was developed after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. Those two mentalities that the Sahaba manifested during that situation, they were developed after that in these two big schools. A school that was called the school of legal reasoning and the school of riwayah or transmission. Ahlul Ra'y wa Ahlul Hadith. Very two common terms in our history. Ahlul Ra'y, they were basically in Iraq, the people of the legal reasoning and the personal reasoning. And the main representative of this school was Imam Abu Hanifa. For sure, some other scholars, but Imam Abu Hanifa was the main big shot that was a big representative of the school of Ahlul Ra'y. And Ahlul Hadith were basically in Hijaz, right? The school of transmission means the school of riwayah, the school of narrating the hadith and the reports of the Prophet ﷺ. It makes a lot of sense to be in Hijaz, right? Because that was the area the Prophet ﷺ was living in. And that was the area that had the biggest number of the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ. For a long time, all ilm and all knowledge was only transmitted in a kind of a verbal or an oral way. It's an oral or verbal transmission. People learn knowledge just through a verbal interaction, right? You go attend the circle of knowledge, you listen to the hadith, you grasp it, you memorize it, you keep it in your memory, and that's it. That was for the biggest part. That was even during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The Quran was preserved this way. Was preserved also in some sort of written forms, like on the sheets and the papers and the scribes of the Prophet ﷺ who wrote the Quran. But mainly the culture was based on memorization. Was based on the personal receiving of knowledge just through the mind, through the memory. They didn't seriously start documenting knowledge until maybe until maybe like 130 something after the hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ. So you're talking about over a full century. People didn't really document a lot of things. The main thing was documented was the Quran, was well preserved, well copied, well distributed among the Muslim countries, and that's it. You'll find few sheets, few books here and there about some sunnah, about some hadith, but nobody actually paid a lot of attention of documenting anything else. 130 something after the hijrah, people started now documenting hadith and documenting the fatwas and the verdicts of the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ. During the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, one of the Umayyad caliphs, who came maybe 132, I think that was his time, when he started the process of documentation of hadith and the verdicts and the fatwas of the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ. What happened is we have a limited number of texts, right? We have a limited number of verses in the Quran, a limited number of reports from the Prophet ﷺ. But the things and the issues that come up every single day are unlimited. So for sure these verses have to be understood in a way that they will be so applicable that we can get to know the ruling of every single thing new that comes to us. Right? When people invent a new thing, a new legal system, a new cultural custom, for example, a new financial transaction, and that wasn't anything the Prophet ﷺ talked about, and that was not anything that was mentioned in the Quran explicitly. So they started to develop a sort of a methodology to understand how can we make the Quran applicable, and how can we make the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ applicable. So we understood that there is a Quran, there is a Sunnah, so they developed the concept of qiyas, which is the analogical reasoning, so they can actually develop a lot of new ahkam. They developed the concept of ijma', which is the consensus. Whatever Muslims perceived to be right is going to be right. And this is a big hujjah for Muslims, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised that this ummah, in the overall number, they will not be for any kind of misguidance. If the whole ummah, with no disagreement, they agreed on something, that means this is insha'Allah haqq. This is something that is true. So that was also a source of legislation for the Muslims. And we have a lot of texts from the Sahaba that indicated the concept of using personal analogical reasoning to understand new ahkam that didn't exist during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So those were the two big schools that happened like quite a bit after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. We have a big misconception about these two schools. Some people think that the people of reasoning, they do not follow the hadith or the ahadith, the reports. And the people of reports, they are so literalist and they do not follow the analogical reasoning. And both concepts are not right. Because the first group, which is the people of ra'i, the people of reasoning, they actually follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And the other group who follow the reports and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, they also do use analogical reasoning to understand the hadith. It's just about the way everybody has his own priorities. Everybody has to put the set and the order of the tools that he is going to use to understand the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Someone would actually dig deeper and look into the wisdom and the reasons behind some of the hadith. Other people would just go with the words, whatever the words say. Exactly as you disagreed last time, right? When we had this discussion here, some people said, we gotta pray on the way. And other people said, no, we're actually gonna pray in Bani Qurayza, right? There is no one single opinion that is the most authentic or the best opinion. Actually, both have a lot of really grounded proofs and evidences that would support them. That was the same thing for these two schools. So both of the schools, they were actually following the Prophet ﷺ. And this misconception about some of them, they didn't follow the sunnah or they didn't pay enough attention for the sunnah or they didn't actually care to learn or to study the sunnah, that's not true by any means. And then after a while, that was developed to the big four schools of thought. The majority of us actually hear these names a lot. Imam Abu Hanifa, Nu'man, Imam Malik ibn Anas, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and Imam Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i rahimahullah. The order is Abu Hanifa, Malik, then al-Shafi'i, then Ahmad ibn Hanbal. This is the historical order, and it's clear from the dates. Every one of them was like a founder and a head of one of these big schools. And for sure there is a lot to talk about these four imams, but they became so popular because they established a methodology of understanding Islam. They were not the only ones who established this, by the way. A lot of other scholars who were mujtahideen, and we're going to define the term of mujtahid, the independent scholar, the independent qualified scholar to give verdicts and fatwas. There were a lot of other scholars and mujtahideen too. There were a lot of other qualified scholars who actually tried to establish another madhahib, another schools of thought. But those became the most famous schools of thought in our history. Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah. Everybody was so famous. You can read a lot about their lives. Imam Abu Hanifa was a big scholar, was almost a tabi'i, because when he was young, he met with some of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam Shafi'i, he said about Abu Hanifa, they both among the founders of the madhahib, he said, "An-nasu fi al-fiqh iyalun ala Abi Hanifa." He said, people, when it comes to fiqh, they are dependent on Abu Hanifa. And he himself, he was a founder of a school of thought. Imam Malik, he described Imam Abu Hanifa to be a great scholar and somebody that you cannot ever debate. Imam Abu Hanifa, he praised Imam Malik because they were contemporary during the same time, and he praised him a lot, and he said he's a jabal, he's a mountain of knowledge. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was a student of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, and he said al-Shafi'i for us is like the sun to this life. So everybody of them praised the other one, although they had kind of big disagreement on some principles of the way they understood the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They established these four schools of thought. And then these schools of thought got developed until they became a kind of big hubs. And everybody just is trying to join them on multiple levels. Starting from the very basic level of just following whatever the school says, all the way until someone who was a great scholar, qualified person to give verdicts and fatwas, but he liked and agreed with the mentality of this madhab, and he joined to actually continue the same route of that madhab. So maybe I'm just a normal Muslim, I hear of this madhab and I want to follow it. Because I trust the madhab, I trust the school, I trust the imam. Starting from here. I'm a student of knowledge and I want to study that madhab, so I like it, I study it. I'm actually a researcher and I'm so interested in fiqh and legal rulings. So I like this madhab because of whatever reason. I like their mentality of understanding the ahkam and deducing the rulings from the Quran and the Sunnah. So you go up with all these ranks in Islamic law until you reach the level of that person who's independent. Independent means he doesn't follow anyone. He can give the hukm and the ruling by himself. He can open the Quran, open the Sunnah and tell you this ayah means so and so in terms of the legal ruling. And then when he does that, he finds out that he's in agreement with the same methodology Shafi'i established, the same methodology Abu Hanifa established. He said, you know what, I'm going to just join this school. Because we both come to the same conclusion, basically. Or we both use the same process that most likely will lead to the same conclusion. This is what happened after these four imams. That's why 90-80% of scholars who came after the era of these four imams, they joined those big hubs, basically, for whatever personal reasons that they choose. But all of these reasons as scholars were based on like knowledge and agreement with the mentality of those four imams. So when we talk about the schools of thought, why schools of thought are so important to follow, right? And why don't we just follow whatever? Or why do we need those schools of thought to understand Islam, or to understand specifically the Islamic law or the Islamic rulings? We have the sources. We have the Quran, we have the Sunnah. We don't need to go through someone else, or we don't need to follow some other school to tell us how to pray, or to tell us how much should we pay for zakat, right? We can just open the Quran and the Sunnah, find out what's going on there, and we can decide this is the way we pray, this is the way we pay zakat, or whatever. So why do we need to follow the school of thought? Or maybe we shouldn't. I made an assumption that we need to follow these schools of thought to practice the Islam correctly. Is that a right assumption or not? I think after we switch off the lights, everybody is just sleeping, right? So again, why do we need to follow the schools of thought? Do we have to? Okay, that's the question. Do we have to follow these schools or not?
Well, I guess that average person has something to follow. Like sometimes, I don't know, because of the differences of opinions, that gives you an option, kind of.
Okay, so forget about the four schools of thought. In general, when we need to know the Islamic ruling of something, do we need to ask someone or to refer to something? Or we should find out by ourselves?
We don't have the proper tools.
We don't what?
We do not have the proper tools.
So what should we do?
We should follow the schools of thought, one of the schools of thoughts, because they have the proper tools to interpret the Quran and Sunnah.
Okay, why don't we just use our minds and figure out what do we want to do?
That's not enough.
It's not enough for what?
to understand and to interpret the Quran and the Sunnah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so sometimes like our interpretation can be totally off, like about the Quran especially.
Mhm. That's why we need to follow someone else's understanding. Okay.
So last time we mentioned in the Quran were things that are not definite and people interpret it different ways.
Mhm.
That's why there's consensus. So we follow scholars, and then those scholars they have their own translation, their own schools, and that's why we pick to follow somebody. And how they interpret something that was mentioned in the Quran but not really definite.
Okay, so what does Islam want us to do? Did Allah ask us to, you need to know how to do these things and you figure it out yourself? Or you actually can just follow someone else and you practice Islam the way they do? Or the way they tell you to do? Do we have any dalil about taqleed, about following or imitating other people in religion? What is the dalil?
Verse in the Quran, فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ. Follow the footsteps of the Prophet.
Okay, فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ. So follow me and Allah will love you. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah is asking the Prophet to tell people this. Okay, so this is following the Prophet. Okay, but the question is, do we need to follow someone else to tell us what did the Prophet do, or we should just follow the Prophet right away?
Follow the Prophet and like follow the companions, and then the tabi'in and so on. It's basically following the Prophet.
So if we follow this chain, it leads to the Prophet at the end. Okay. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. That's another dalil was mentioned that Allah says in the Quran, and ask the people of knowledge in case if you don't know. Right? And they said that could be a dalil for taqleed. Taqleed means following or imitation, that you imitate someone in his opinion or in his practice. So, in general, we're going to get into this point again, but in general, we need to follow someone to tell us how to pray. So what if the obligation was everybody has to do this by himself?
It's going to be subject to many interpretations.
Is it possible?
It's not.
Let's say we didn't have any books of fiqh, right? And it's just a personal obligation that you need to understand from the Quran, and whatever reached you out of the Sunnah, the details of prayer and the details of zakah, the details of financial transaction, the details of marriage, all these things. If that was the obligation, it's going to be much more difficult, right?
But if their opinions are all correct, why does it matter which one?
If what?
If their opinions were all correct, right? Which
You've been to schools?
the schools of
Oh, that's a different point. We're getting to this point, but I'm talking about the concept of taqleed first. Regardless who is that person that we would follow. The first premise is, should we follow someone else or not? And then if we say yes, we say, okay, so who is the best person to follow? Right? And if they are correct, so what is the point of following? That's another good question. Yeah.
I don't think you should follow anyone blindly besides the Prophet ﷺ. I think you should probably follow the lead behind the action of someone. Because I think if you follow a person, specifically how he acts, you're not gonna, without the lead that returns you to the Prophet ﷺ, then
Okay.
So if everyone wanted to be a seeker of knowledge, it would be difficult on us.
Mhm.
We're all seekers of knowledge, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So since we have a school, it just helps the normal people just get the knowledge directly. They spend their whole life to learn about it. So I think that's why it should be there.
Okay.
For example, if I were to do something that in one school of knowledge or school of thought, whatever, it said that you can't do it, but another school of thought says it's okay. Like how would I judge, or how would I be able to give somebody advice, for example?
How would you know if there was a mistake?
Yeah, it's kind of complicated,
What is complicated? To know who's right.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll get into this question. Okay. So when we say we're gonna get to all these questions, they're really in the slides. So when we say that we need to follow a madhab, and we need to understand the authenticity of this madhab, right? So when we say, for example, and this is the point here, when we say the Maliki school says so and so about dogs, for example, okay? When we say the Maliki school says this, what does that mean? Does it mean that the founder of the school, who's Imam Malik, for example, is the one who said this? Or it does mean that this opinion is the opinion of the majority of scholars who followed the mentality and the methodology of Imam Malik? And how weighty this opinion will be if we understand it this way. So if Imam Malik started his madhab in the 2nd century of Hijrah, and this madhab kept like developing all the way until the 10th century of Hijrah, for example. We have like average of 7 to 8 centuries of like constant development of the madhab and refinement of the opinions and investigation of the daleeds of the madhab. And they pass on all these daleeds and all these points all the way until basically like very recent time. Maybe until today, if we still have the qualified scholars of that madhab, they're still developing the same opinions. That means this opinion is being certified, is being signed basically by thousands of scholars, right? Who certified on this, who said that this is the way Islam views dogs, for example, right? That means this opinion is really valid. This opinion is really weighty opinion. It's really something that you should appreciate. You do not have to follow, but it's an opinion that you have to highly appreciate, and you have to be very, very careful before you say, okay, this opinion is not correct, or this opinion is not really on a strong base of dalil, right? So when we say al-Shafi'iyya, al-Malikiyya, that's why we say it in the plural word, right? Shafi'is, Malikis, Hanbalis, right? We use this word because it's not only the scholar. The school was named after him because he's the one who founded the methodology. But they developed not only the issues, they developed the mentality and the methodology itself too, by the way. So they would disagree with the founder with even the principles of the madhab itself. They would say this is the way they dealt with the universal words in the Quran. But we would disagree with him on this. Or we would disagree with him on the application of this concept of ambiguity of some words in the Quran. We are going to know more about this in Usul al-Fiqh, inshallah. So when you say a madhab says so and so, that means it's a very well-grounded opinion. It's a very high level of investigation, of a scholarly investigation, that they came up with this conclusion at the end. Okay, this is just an introduction before talking about these things. So sometimes you do not like the opinion because of whatever reason, right? Because you do not feel comfortable following the opinion. Because your people do not follow this opinion. Because your community do not follow this opinion. Your family, your culture, whatever. That's fine, but that doesn't mean the opinion is wrong. Right? You were raised in a society or a community that says dogs are not tahir, they're najis, you cannot play with dogs, you cannot touch dogs, you cannot deal with anything with dogs. Okay. Why? Because it's najis. And that's the opinion of 3 schools of thought. Right? But there is another school of thought, like Imam Malik said, no, it is not najis. Okay, and you can actually touch them and there's no problem. And he has his own interpretation of the hadith. So you can agree, you can disagree, it's up to you. But if you disagree and you're not a scholar, you can disagree on a personal level, not on a scholarly level. You can say, I don't feel comfortable doing this. Completely, you're right. Because if you do not play with dogs, your iman is still okay, right? There's no problem with your iman. It's not a problem of haram and wajib. It's a problem of mubah or not, right? And even, by the way, they didn't say that you cannot play with dogs, other madhab. They said it's just najis. You can play whatever you want. But if it touches you, you need to do other things. That's the point. Dogs are okay. You do whatever you want with the dogs. The point is how to purify your actually body or your clothes after you play with them. Basically with certain conditions. Right? But everybody said, okay, so do whatever with dogs. I usually get this question. And it's, the most painful question when I get it from a little kid, that can I just play with a dog? And usually the parents put me in that situation because they want me to be the evil person that would say no. And really, or especially if they want to buy dogs, basically. So they would bring the kid, ask the sheikh. And because the parents know, no, we're not going to buy dogs anyway, but they want it to come from me. So they would hate me instead of that. Anyway, so buying dogs, by the way, is a different issue than touching and tahara and all these things. 2 different issues. Okay, we're not talking about buying or selling. We're talking about the way you interact physically with the dog. So nobody had a problem with this. The problem is, what should you do physically as tahara after you touch a dog or do anything with the dog? So that means you do not follow this opinion because you don't want to follow this opinion. That's it. But you need to be very careful to say, you know what, their dalil is not strong. Right? Here comes the scholarly investigation. You cannot say they do not have a dalil. No, you need to be very careful because you have 7 centuries of scholars who have actually developed this opinion. They have actually investigated this opinion, who have put their input, who have revised and refined all of these traditions and hadith. And if you and it's not really hard, you can just open a reliable source of Maliki madhab, you will see a lot of very good adillah and proofs and evidence about dogs. You'd say, you know what, it makes sense, right? You can say, I'm not convinced, but again, not on a scholarly level, because that's so important. Because the problem is, some people would say, okay, this opinion is weak, right? But this opinion is not evidence-based, and that's not correct. Unless maybe you're a scholar and you're on a level of ijtihad, that's different. But if you're just an average person, you can say, I don't feel comfortable doing this, right? And that applies to all the differences of opinions among the schools of fiqh. If it's a valid and considerable disagreement, right? We differentiate between two kinds of disagreement, by the way. We have something that we call al-khilaf al-mu'tabar and al-khilaf ghayr al-mu'tabar. We have something that we call it the considerable disagreement and the unconsiderable disagreement. Considerable disagreement, that means you can follow any of both or three opinions or four opinions if you want. Why? Because everybody has a dalil, everybody has an evidence. It's an evidence-based, it's a valid interpretation, it's a valid understanding, you can follow whatever you want. Unconsiderable disagreement means no. Because of whatever reason, there are a lot of procedures you take until you come to that conclusion that, okay, there was one opinion who went off track and they've introduced something that is not really according to the majority of scholars' understanding, so it is rejected, you cannot be doing this. Right? So that's unconsiderable. You cannot consider this, you cannot recognize or consider this disagreement because it is not valid disagreement, basically. But if it is a valid, it's your personal choice to choose one, but you cannot say the other one is wrong. Okay? In Salatul Fajr, for example, we have the sunnah of qunut. Have you heard of this before? So qunut is actually after when you stand up after the second ruku' of Salatul Fajr, you make dua. If it's a jama'ah, the whole jama'ah makes dua. That's a sunnah according to Imam Shafi'i, according to Imam Malik. It is not a sunnah according to the other two schools of thought. Right? And you'll find millions of fights in the Muslim mosques about these two things. Seriously, everywhere. In Middle East, in North America, same thing. Should we make qunut or not? Right? And some people, if they just follow that opinion, that's fine. Right? If the majority of the mosque do not do this, that's fine. Okay. And the Imam should respect this. If the majority they make that, that's fine too. The problem is not which opinion to follow. The problem is the attempt of canceling the other opinion. The attempt of saying, oh, that opinion is weak. The other opinion is not the sunnah. The people who do that, they're doing bid'ah. Right? And we start hearing this word a lot. That's a bid'ah. If you make qunut in Fajr, that's a bid'ah. No, it's not a bid'ah. Why? Because you have a dalil and the other group has a dalil too. Right? They just disagreed on the way they interpreted the hadith. They said the Prophet ﷺ did this for a very certain reason, because there was a war between him and a few other tribes, and he made qunut to make dua against those tribes who killed 70 of the Sahaba without any serious fight. They were just they made a kind of an attack on the Sahaba and they were watering for their sheep and they killed 70 of them. So he made dua for a long time, every day after Fajr, against those people. Ra'al wa Dhakwan, two tribes. So that was for qunut al-nawazil, because there was a calamity and a problem that happened to the society. So he made dua just for this problem that people are afflicted with. And then they kept interpreting the hadith, okay, and then he stopped doing this. Because there is one version of the hadith said, ثُمَّ تَرَكَهُ, then he stopped. So they said, so that was exceptional, it's not the constant case of his sunnah. But the other group said, no, but we have another version of the hadith that said, مَا زَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ يَقْنُتُ فِي الْفَجْرِ حَتَّى فَرَقَ الدُّنْيَا. So the Prophet ﷺ kept making qunut in Salatul Fajr until he died. That means he kept doing the sunnah until he died. That means it's a sunnah that has to be applied all the time. Right? Both have points, both have very valid understanding of the hadith. And they had long discussions on the hadith, which one is authentic, which one is more authentic, which one is narrated by a qualified narrator of the hadith, all these discussions. And again, two respectable and respectful opinions among those madhab. You want to follow one of them, you can follow one of them. But you cannot say the other one is wrong, the other one is weak, the other one is bid'ah. Those terms you cannot use. And it's not the right of any average person to use, by the way. Because it has to be through a scholarly investigation that you can study and you say, you know what, this is not a strong opinion. And even if, by the way, you do your own investigation and you come up with a conclusion that one of the opinions is weak, nothing is going to change, by the way. Right? It's your own personal right, as if those scholars had their own personal rights and they did this. I know one of my teachers who was a really big qualified scholar of fiqh, and he was asked in a TV interview, he was asked about a fiqh issue and he gave two different opinions. He said, we have a couple madhab who said that and the other madhab said the other thing. So the one who's making the interview asked him, okay, which opinion you actually prefer? Or which opinion you give more authority over the other? He said, it doesn't matter. I didn't have to tell you my personal opinion. He said, okay, but people would actually love to know what's your own personal preference over these two opinions. So he said something that was very brilliant. He said, if I give you now my preference of picking one of the two opinions over the other, that will not mean anything except that one of the two teams had only one more vote. One extra vote. If for example, like 1,000 scholars said that and 900 said that, it's gonna be whether 1,001 or 901, right? Said nothing changed actually. Because my personal opinion is not of a big change, of a big added value, compared to this huge number of scholars who say the same thing about two opinions. So it's the same thing. I'm saying even you reach that level of scholarly understanding, you're still not gonna add a lot to the disagreements and the differences of opinions among the scholars. So if we refer that back to the four schools of thought, why there's four madhab? We had a lot of other founders of madhab. They said at a point of time we had like 40, 50, 60 schools of thought at the beginning. The first couple centuries after the death of the Prophet, we had a lot of founders of madhab. People were so highly qualified. Said the four madhab are the most authoritative among all the other madhab. They had the largest authority by all those scholars who joined them. The most developed. Because some other schools of thought, they were established and then people stopped actually searching and developing them. Not a lot of people joined the club of this madhab basically. The concept of the successive scholarship, because it's everything through the isnad. It's a chain of narrators and scholars who just deliver the message a generation after generation. And again, they're not just delivering in terms of blind following. It's a delivery that is full of investigation, that is full of, again, revising, that is full of refinement. And that was the most happening to these four schools of thought. And then the most widespread in the Muslim world. Like basically 99% of the Muslim world were following one of these madhab. And until today, people are still following them, right? So that's in general, this topic is very long, but that's in general the concept of the four madhab. And here comes a lot of questions that you already raised before. The first question is, okay, so do I have to follow a madhab or no? So these questions I want you to answer before giving my personal opinion. Yes?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, why? So all the common questions are yes and no, but there are a why question too. So why do we have to follow madhab? Okay. Sorry?
There's been a lot of work, a lot of studies, a lot of things like
That's the reason why do we follow it. Just keep in mind that I said we have to, right? It's not just we are recommitted to, that we have to, yes.
I think it makes things easier, but you don't.
You don't have to. So it's optional. So what is the other option? You follow what? Oh, so you mean the answer is it doesn't have to be one madhab,
Yeah.
but does it have to be a madhab?
If you follow all four schools.
Okay, that is still included in the answer too.
Yeah.
So a madhab here doesn't mean like 1 out of 4.
Oh.
It means like one of the schools of thought.
Yes.
So you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So no, you don't have to, but if you're not going to, you can come like on a scholar level.
If what? Sorry?
If you don't want to follow madhab, you have to like be a scholar, so you can make your own opinion on things.
Okay, so it's one of two options.
Yeah.
Whether you're a follower or a scholar.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think you have to follow. If by following your madhab you mean that I have to follow everything this madhab says, then I don't think, no, you shouldn't follow.
Again, so keep this question general, the madhab.
Well, I think you should definitely consider the four, or the opinions of all four schools,
Mhm.
and then basically follow the strongest dalil based on the scholars or a more. You have to understand the four opinions, but you definitely have to go through someone of higher knowledge, not your own interpretation of the strongest out of four.
Okay, but at the end of the day, you're gonna follow that one, you're gonna ask.
Well, eventually, yes, you will follow one. Again,
So the same thing, you follow an authority.
what?
It's the same thing, you just follow another authority, that's it.
Yeah, of course.
So forget about the four madhab.
Okay.
It's the concept of do you follow someone or no? You can do it yourself.
Oh no, you definitely follow. You have to follow.
Okay, so the process is the four madhab or someone else who is following one of the madhab or someone else who is a fifth madhab, for example.
So can you repeat the question? Can you repeat the
No, I just want to eliminate all the impossible options, basically. So now, you said there is taqleed, there is following. So you follow one of the madhab. Okay? The other one, to be a scholar yourself. Not only a scholar, by the way, to be an independent, qualified scholar in legal, in Islamic law, I mean. Or the third one, no, I can do it myself. Is there any fourth option? I can just figure it out myself. I have the Quran, right? And I have some books of hadith. I can find out myself. Is this a possible option?
It's not viable now.
Why not?
What? Why not? That's my question.
We don't have the proper tools. We don't have the language. We don't.
No, that's my question. That's my question. So again, you don't have to be misled or misguided with my premise that I introduced, by the way. So maybe you just submit it to this authority because I told you to submit to this authority, but you don't have to. So because some people would say, yes, I have now we have a lot of books have been printed already and published, right? So I have the Quran, I have the big 6 collections of ahadith, and we have a big tradition of the Prophet being printed and published. I can just read, I know Arabic, and we have translations too. I can just read these things and I can find out myself. I don't need the 4 schools of thought to tell me how many rak'ahs I need to pray or how much should I pay for zakah. I can find out myself.
How deep is your understanding in Arabic?
What?
How much do you know in Arabic?
I don't need Arabic. We have translated copies of all these things.
The problem is that when you do it yourself, you will not be able to come up with as comprehensive a solution, looking at all the different aspects of like fiqh or following. So you might be able to know how many times to pray and how many rak'ahs to pray and all that, and certain things, but not every little aspect you'll be able to become an expert in. So it's very hard.
Okay, I will just take sister and come with you. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't think you have to follow a method. I mean, I think, God did give us, some, some, thinking power. I mean, you can read and read what these 4, say,
Mm-hmm.
but at the end of the day, you do feel, you don't have to say, okay, well, I'm this or I'm that. You can just, basically, follow yourself, and read and everything. But I mean, that's just my opinion.
Okay, so let's just paint the picture in a more clear way. We have here Quran and Sunnah sources, right? And we are here. We want to reach the Quran and Sunnah, right? We have the elevator, basically, which is the 4 schools of thought. And we have the regular stairs to go to the 30th floor, for example, to the Quran and the Sunnah. Okay, so we have the first option is to follow these 4 schools of thought, which is the elevator, and we're going to get there in less than 1 minute, right? And we have the stairs that we can take for 30 minutes, for example, until you get to that floor through studying and become a scholar, right? Or basically to establish a 5th method, that's fine. They didn't just, it's not a monopoly. It's not something that they have the only right to represent Islam, right? You can establish a 5th method if you want. Is there any other way to get up to the 30th floor to the Quran and Sunnah? That's the question. You just agree on this premise first. So you do it yourself, but in this way, you follow the schools of thought in this way. Is there a third option? Or can you do it yourself, but not through scholarly understanding and learning?
Yes, of course there's different ways of getting to whatever you want to get to, but there's always a risk involved.
There's always what?
There's always a risk involved. At the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
you might end up with the wrong interpretation of whatever you're trying to research. You might end up,
Mm-hmm.
and this is maybe perhaps why we end up having so many sects out there, different ways of
So what does Islam want us to do? What does Allah want us to do in that situation?
seek the truth, but at the same time you have to be respectful of our scholars who have already.
Seek the truth is what we all agree on. The question is how to seek the truth. How did He want us to seek the truth?
Good question.
By asking, finding out true scholars.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, the first schools of thought, like you said, reached all the way back to the Sahaba, right? Imam Muhammad, like you said, interacted with some of the Sahaba. The grandfather of Imam Shafi'i was a Sahaba.
The successive scholarship.
And the knowledge was all the way back to the Prophet.
Mhm.
And they were each other's students.
Yes.
So obviously the knowledge that we need to have I went through them to reach us.
Mhm.
Why would we go through all of that all over again to basically do what they already did? It's like you said, it's the stairs as opposed to the elevator.
Exactly. So if we have both options, which is the stairs and the elevator, right? So does it make a lot of sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would ask every single one of us personally to take the stairs? What if I don't want to study? I don't have time. Right? I don't want to open books and to study and to learn and to attend halaqas and courses to know that I need to pay 2.5 of my money. I just want to go to the masjid, ask the imam, how much should I pay? Right? By asking a sheikh or an imam or a scholar about an opinion, now you're making taqleed, right? By asking a doctor about a description or a prescription, that you're making taqleed, right? You submit to authorities all day long. It's not only in Islam. That's something that is very natural and very normal. So when you ask a person about an opinion, you're making taqleed. He's telling you both options are there. We're not saying that, again, nobody should say anything more. Nobody should actually introduce anything other than what the scholars or the four schools of thought introduced. No. We're saying you have two options and you should consider one of them. You can be a scholar yourself, that's fine. Actually, they said if you become a scholar, you're not allowed to follow another one. You're not allowed. That's not legal. If you are an independent, qualified scholar, you cannot make taqleed. Halas, because you've reached that level, you can't.
Who determines?
What?
Who determines it?
The scholars who describe the process of ijtihad itself. And that's a good question. How did they describe the process of ijtihad? Through the way the Sahaba dealt with the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So through the story of Bani Qurayza we talked about last time. So next halaqah we're going to talk about usul al-fiqh, how did they develop this methodology basically. But the point is, it's very logical that you do it yourself this way, or you follow one of these authorities. Right? But you cannot get up to the 30th floor without both. Right? You cannot just jump to the 30th floor without the stairs or the elevator. That's the point. Okay, so if I want to follow one of these schools, should I choose one of them, or I can just follow all of them together? Okay, if I want to choose one, we're gonna get to the other option. If I want to choose one, how can I choose my madhab? No, how can I determine which one I want to study? Study them first and then choose one? Okay, that's a way.
To me, it doesn't really matter. As long as you pick one, just pick one. It doesn't matter which one.
How can you pick one? The what?
Yeah, you can choose. So as you said, you can study all of them and pick one, or you can just follow the community, whichever is the most popular. Like in certain areas, Maliki madhab is more common. Some areas Hanafi madhab. So you just follow that. You can follow that, or you can learn that from family members or other issues in the community that's in that.
Okay.
Maybe one that is more
Sorry,
relevant to your situation.
Sorry, say that again.
Maybe one that's more relevant to your situation. Like I don't know if there's like.
I'm not talking about following a madhab in a certain issue in general.
No, but like I mean like things that you already do like almost similar. I don't know.
Okay, but you need to read about it or study it first to decide on this, right?
Yeah.
Because you need to know how it's going to be relevant.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, okay, so, I forgot, I'm sorry.
That's okay. We'll get back again to you. What?
The Sheikh you love.
The sheikh what?
Sheikh you love.
The sheikh you love? Oh, okay. Who's that sheikh you love? Okay. But you don't know my madhab yet. Okay. Like, any other thoughts on this?
Like your parents follow?
What the parents follow?
Yes, the country follows.
What the country follows?
So if you're just following what your parents told you to do, or like what to believe.
No, you're not following the parents. You're following the school the parents follow.
Oh yeah, the school that your parents believe,
Mhm.
right? Like I just feel like you need to know what if you actually believe in it. Like you can't. I just feel like blindly believing in whatever somebody. Yeah, I know, but then if you just pick what your parents told you to pick. what to
Oh, yeah,
believe.
but he's
Like,
asking how, would you know which one to trust?
yeah, just, you know,
They mention this as one of the criteria that you pick the madhab.
sorry?
They mention this as one of the criteria that you can pick your madhab through. And it's not my opinion though, by the way. Yeah.
I don't think you should specifically follow one.
Mhm.
I think that you should just look at the evidence of each opinion on every matter. So, for example, if you're going to get married, or if you're going to salah, for example, look at the opinion of all four based on the evidence.
Okay, in every issue by itself.
Every issue has
Okay. تفضل. Too late, I know.
I will go a step back for following because I feel it's not clear enough.
Because there are more
Yeah,
questions
I
to
mean
come.
by follow is like you ask someone like Sheikh what you want to do. When he told you what you should do, he has like evidence for that. Then you can challenge him, say what is the evidence for this, and he can tell you like he will go back to either Quran, Hadith, Ijma', Qiyas. He will go with one of the resources, like sources of fiqh.
Okay.
It's like not following, like blindly following. It's like following by going back to like something. One of the sources. This is what I understand. Following.
Okay. So I didn't want to answer that question because we're supposed to finish the questions and then review all of them again. But okay, I'm going to answer this first question. So, Hashem Muhammad, now you're going to be happy because I'm going to answer the question finally. So, alhamdulillah. So, this first question, do I have to follow a madhab? No. You do not have to follow a madhab. Okay? And here you differentiate between two situations. Between an average person, an average Muslim, or a student of knowledge. Okay? An average Muslim, he doesn't have to follow a madhab. He's only required and responsible for making sure his ibadah and religion is practiced in the right manner. How can he do that? Through a lot of means. Through asking his local scholar. Through learning from an authentic source. Through learning and knowing about different madahib, but he's making sure, I'm going to talk about this, he's making sure that he doesn't just making like a pick and choose between the opinions and making just random scenarios of practicing Islam that are not acceptable. I mean, he figures it out. He was responsible for this. He needs to know what is the authentic authority or resource that I can learn Islam from, and I'm going to ask a scholar. And they say, Al-Ammi madhabuhu madhabu man yufti. The average person, his madhab is the madhab of the person who gives him the fatwa. You ask a sheikh, how should I do this? How much should I pay zakah? He tell you that. If you trust him, follow him. Follow the opinion or the fatwa that he's going to give you. And that's it. You do not have to follow one of the four schools of thought. You do not have to have that label that people hate labeling. It's not about labeling, just a methodology that you follow to understand the religion. And that's it. So this is for the average person. Okay, now I'm a student of knowledge. Now I'm coming to attend the Al-Majlis halaqa and I'm planning to be, inshallah, a student of knowledge, and then I'm going to be a big scholar in a couple of courses, inshallah. And I'm going to teach fiqh and everything to everybody in Windsor. Here we say you have to follow madhab, not from a shari'i perspective. So the have to here is not Islamically that you have to, is that academically you have to. Because you're not going to be able to be well versed, to be well grounded in the Islamic law without understanding at least one of these madhab. You cannot be well educated in fiqh without understanding at least one of them. Actually, you should study one of them very well, and then you should study comparative fiqh, and you understand the rest of the madhab and why did they disagree on these things. If you want to be a person who is specializing in fiqh, that's a completely different scenario. And now comes the way you study, the academics of fiqh basically. It's not have to that. If you don't do that, have to legally in Islam, that means you get the noob if you don't do it. No. Talk about have to academically, that you have to study fiqh this way. An average person, no, you don't have to follow madhab. That's the premise one. When you move to the second one, how do I choose my madhab? Based on that premise that you do not have to. But now I want to, because I'm a student of knowledge, or because it's just an option. We said you don't have to, but you still can do it if you want. Right? But you don't have to. So I just want to follow one madhab. It's just peace of mind. Or, and some of you mentioned this point, which is very valid, I just want to respect my culture, which is really very valid. It's not about personal desire, by the way. It's about being realistic. I want to respect my culture, right? We know all our brothers and sisters from the Indo-Pak community, they follow the Hanafi madhab. I want to respect my culture, I'm going to follow the Hanafi madhab. That's completely valid. That's actually, you need to be very considerate with these things, because if you go against the norm, sometimes it's not a good thing. It's not always cool to be against the norm of people, right? Because you cause a lot of problems and fitan by doing this. If you are in a city that is full of Hanafi people and they do not make qunut after Fajr, do not be this very like smart person that, oh, now I need to apply the Sunnah because that's the opinion of other scholars and I'm going to make qunut after Fajr. Now you're causing fitna because maybe people are not exposed to differences of opinions and they don't understand what you're doing. Well, and that happened. We have a lot of horrible stories about these things. It was reported that Imam al-Shafi'i, when he went to Iraq, to one of the cities that was full of the students of Imam Abu Hanifa, they actually presented him or asked him to lead the Salatul Fajr. And he's the founder of the madhab himself. Okay, so he understands the qunut better than any one of us. He led the Salah and he didn't make qunut. And he said, I did this out of respect to the followers of Imam Abu Hanifa because they know that, or they believe that we shouldn't make qunut in Salatul Fajr. So this one of the ways that you should choose the madhab. If you want to follow a madhab, you say, that's my cultural madhab, or my country madhab, or my community madhab, or whatever. What if my community or my culture doesn't have a certain madhab? It's mixed, it's very diverse, like here, for example, in North America, you pick whatever you want. If you want to study, some other limitations come, which is the availability of the resources of understanding or of learning this madhab. Let's say I want to study Hanbali madhab. I live in Windsor. There's no Hanbali scholar in Windsor. So what should you do? Whether you travel somewhere else to study it or you do not have a chance to study it. Right? The only available source around me is that madhab. Okay, I'm going to go for it because that's the only available source. If it doesn't really matter to you. If it does, you need to figure out somewhere else that you find an online class, you travel somewhere else, you go to a different community, whatever. Like that's a very personal choice to make. And then the very common question is which one is the best and the most correct? Now I have the 4 schools of thought and I want to pick one of them to follow based on any of the criteria that we mentioned. So which one is the best? All of them? Okay, but one of them has to be the best. It's what?
It's a relative question because it's going to be like everyone has different perspective according to what you feel is.
So there is no one of them that we can mark to be the best and the most reliable one?
The best is for that, like for example, like community, as you said.
No. Absolute preference. They're all the same? What? Yeah, I'm waiting for this. Okay, so Shafi'i madhab is the best thing.
Can we backtrack because I have a question? So, for example,
this one?
No, even before that, when you said that the average person does not have to choose or follow a madhab. So is that like a rukhsah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is that like an ease? Because like in my mind, I think of a madhab as a rule, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to, like if you follow a particular madhab, like the Hanafi fiqh teaches you to do wudu this way, pray salah this way. You do wudu using Shafi'i madhab and you do prayer during Hanafi madhab. Like, do they reconcile? I mean,
there's another question about this point.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I said he doesn't have to follow a madhab, but he has to follow an authority. Right? I'm not pro the concept of, okay, open the Quran and figure it out. No, that's wrong. That doesn't make any sense. That's my opinion. Doesn't make any sense. You can just open the Quran and say, okay, I'll just understand how can I do that. There's no such a way. Right. This doesn't apply to any science, right? This doesn't apply to any kind of ilm. That doesn't make any sense. But you have to follow an authority. But I was saying that you do not have to label yourself that I am a follower of Imam Malik or I'm a follower of Shafi'i. You do not have to do this. If you ask a sheikh and you do not even know the source of the answer that he gave you, it doesn't matter. Right? If you come at the day of judgment, you do not know even who is Ahmad ibn Hanbal, who is Shafi'i, who is Malik, but you prayed well and you did everything well, that's fine.
What if you know?
What?
What if you know and you're trying to follow a certain authority? Like for example,
it's the same thing. I mean, I was saying that example that you do not have to. What you are required to do is that you make sure your ibadah is correct. Or your practice of the religion is correct in general, through any kind of reliable authority. But the concept of mixing between opinions, there's a question about this one. So which one is the best and most correct? There is no best one. It's a very relevant, very relative question. Okay, what if the Imam of the Madhab made a mistake?
That's on him.
What?
That's on him.
Ya salam. That's on him. We're good. People usually do that with Imams and Sheikhs too, right? You're like, just ask a Sheikh and you'll be good. Yeah.
You're rewarded for that. It's true.
He will be rewarded for that.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. So it's not our point that was going to happen to him. So the point is, okay, it's possible that he made mistakes, right? Okay, so we just accept anything he said?
No, if you know he made a mistake, that's different. But if you unknowingly are following him and you don't know that he made a mistake, like, do you know or you don't know? What's the difference?
If we know.
If we know that what he's saying is incorrect,
Mhm.
then you're obligated to, at least seek a second opinion or talk to another imam and confirm. Because, I don't want to argue with the person of knowledge. I don't want to argue with the scholar. So you just want to make sure if you think that there is a mistake, you can verify that with somebody else.
Mhm. Okay.
But if the original founder of the madhab, he might have made a decision, but over the centuries, the scholars, they review these things, and sometimes new evidence comes up and they change their opinion. So we follow the current day madhab, even though it might conflict with the original founder said.
Okay.
Yeah, basically what he said. Like, it was said that Imam Shafi'i was in like the perfect situation because he had a teacher who was Imam Malik and the student who was Imam Ahmad. So if there was anything, like they would correct each other basically. And learn from each other, but at the same time.
And that's why he was the best. Yeah.
It's narrated that all four leaders of the Madhab said.
It's what?
It's properly documented that all four of the scholars of the Madhab have said that anything that I have done mistake or anything that goes against what the Prophet ﷺ says, then just throw it against.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. The value is gone.
Yes. They also that they said if you find something that I said that is against the Quran and the Sunnah, just throw it away and just follow the Quran and the Sunnah. But when they said that to their students, not to the average people.
Yeah.
That's the important point. Maybe we talked about this in the four Imams Halaqa. Imam Shafi'i said, إذا صح الحديث فهو مذهبي. Whenever you find an authentic hadith, that's my madhab. You can attribute it to me. But he didn't open it for everybody. He said to his students and to the qualified scholars in his school, if you find an authentic hadith that I didn't follow or I didn't know about, basically if he knew about it, he would follow it, you can just attribute it to me. And they wrote books explaining this only statement of Imam Shafi'i. Imam Subki wrote a book explaining this point, this statement, إذا صح الحديث فهو مذهبي. Right? That's why one of the most ridiculous things that you would hear in your life is that I heard it myself a couple of times before in a Friday khutbah, basically. There was a khatib. I don't remember exactly the fiqh issues he mentioned in the khutbah, but he said, this thing is haram. And then he's telling people on the member that was not here, so it's not in Canada. So he told them, okay, I know some of you would come to me after the khutbah and say, okay, but Abu Hanifa said this. And so, he named another scholar, said this. But my question to you would be, do you want to follow Abu Hanifa or do you want to follow the Prophet? Right? Is this a correct statement?
No, it is.
Why?
Because if something that Imam Abu Hanifa said contradicts the Prophet ﷺ intended, then there's a problem. Right? Because as you said, if there's a contradiction with the Sunnah, that's a concern.
Okay, another scenario that happened with me personally. Sorry. There was a khatib who talked about, I almost forgot also the fiqh issue, but he said, doing this thing is bid'ah. And I felt like somebody stabbed me in the heart, because the majority of scholars said that's sunnah. The majority of scholars said it's a sunnah, so it's completely the opposite. It's a fiqh issue. So this time, I usually was not used to like give comments or feedback after khutbah specifically. But this time I couldn't resist. I said, I have to talk to him. I didn't know the khatib, but I said, I have to talk to him. So I waited for him, and then I went to him after the khutbah. I said, tried to be nice. Like, I was really angry, but I tried to be nice. Jazakallah khair, nice khutbah and stuff. But I just have one little comment. You mentioned that issue, and he said it's a bid'ah. And he was so furious, and it's bid'ah, don't ever do this and that stuff. I said, okay, I would advise you if you want to review it again, because actually, to my knowledge, it's not bid'ah. So he said, no, it is a bid'ah. So I didn't want to make the attribution of the opinion first out of respect for him. So I said, no, I'm pretty sure that it is not bid'ah, because actually the jumhur, the majority of scholars, said it's a sunnah. They didn't say it is not bid'ah, they said it's sunnah. So you can see the huge contradiction. So he said, no, they didn't say that. So I told him, okay, you know what, I'm like, just trust me, I'm pretty sure. He knows that I'm a little bit confident. So you know what, I'm really sure that they said this. Said, okay, they said that. And so what? I told him, okay, like, what do you mean, so what? He said the same thing. He said, what if the majority of scholars says something and the Prophet said something else? Which one would you follow? So I told him I would follow the majority of scholars. He said, what? He got so angry and like, how dare you say this? I said, yeah, because actually you're not asking me to follow the Prophet, you're asking me to follow your own understanding of what the Prophet said. So it's basically the same thing. What would make your own understanding of what he said better than what they said, or better than their understanding of what the Prophet said?
No, but there's a difference right now. So we didn't say that this is the interpretation of what the Prophet said.
Yes.
That's implied in that, but I mean, it could be very clear that the Prophet said.
This is impossible to happen. It's impossible to happen. Because all the hadith are there. We have all the hadith. All possible hadith that we had, we have all of them. There's no hadith that we found out today in 2018 that they didn't know about. We can find out about some hadith that maybe in a different chain of narrators, for example. But the overall of Sunnah, it's all documented and they knew about it. And you will have to have a sort of interpretation for the hadith. Or they didn't want to follow the hadith for a different reason. Right? In the four Imams Halaqah, we give that example for Imam Malik. He said himself, I have an authentic hadith, I'm not going to follow it because the practice of the people of Al-Madinah is different. So I'm not going to follow it. But he knows the hadith. He actually reported in his own book, Al-Muwatta, but he didn't want to follow it. So they knew about this hadith. They just had another interpretation. Again, it's your right not to be convinced. But you cannot say, that's bid'ah, or let's just follow the Prophet. Because they were also following the Prophet. They didn't follow someone else. Right? It's just about how did we understand what the Prophet did. So this statement is really like misleading people because it sounds correct for sure. All of us want to follow the Prophet, but they were following the Prophet. They were not following someone else. Right? Again, when you tell me, oh, don't follow, this statement is very famous. Don't follow madahib, don't follow people, follow the Prophet. So no, he's not asking you to follow the Prophet. He's asking you to follow his own understanding of the Prophet. If he says it this way, that's fine. That's fine. You can follow him if you want. Right? But he cannot say, I'm the only representative of Islam that says this is what the Prophet said. Because I can argue about what he said, is it authentic or not. I can argue your understanding of this, right? I can argue that I have another hadith that actually kind of contradicts your hadith. I have a million of things that I can argue with, right? It's an endless discussion. So you cannot just say, okay, follow the Prophet. It's a very loose statement that doesn't mean anything practically. That was my point.
Just in follow-up to the comment you just made, what if he argues that about 30% of scholars that he can list?
What if what?
If he's following some scholars, let's say 30% vis-a-vis 70%.
Yes.
Would that dispute would you at that point say, okay, maybe there's some scholars?
No, I'm completely fine with him following the opinion. The problem is he said the other opinion is bid'ah. That was my problem. It's not a big...
Bid'ah piece is that...
Yeah, my problem is calling the other opinion bid'ah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not following the other opinion. Again, follow whatever you want. I don't have any problem with people following whatever they want. It's the fact that before saying about an opinion, it's wrong, or it is not on the Sunnah. No, you need to be very careful using these terms. That's my point. Okay, can I change my madhab?
Yes.
Can I go from Catholic to something else? You need to go through a process, right? It's not one of the four schools of thought. Can you just switch between one school to another school? And is there a process to do this? You need to go to the mosque and to get another new certificate to apply a new application. Is it based on anything or just like a... Can you change the madhab first? And then we ask about the procedure. You can? Really? Why are you confident about this? Like, why? Because you don't have to... Okay, that based on the first premise. Yes.
It depends on your intention.
Okay. No, not my madhab in general. We'll come into the issue itself.
If you want to change your method based on an intention or whether you find a hukum here that I can use, it's easier for me.
Okay.
Forget the Arabic term.
رخص.
Forget the word. So if that's the idea, but it's the intention that you have, you prefer this method of, like you said, using the tools over this method, then that's qana'a, yes, but if it's just based on to find an easier way or a way that suits yourself, then that's a little...
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just because we don't take longer time, for sure you can change your madhab. Actually, what if you are a scholar and you are a follower or a scholar of you are a representative of one of those madhab? Can you change your madhab?
Sure. Yes.
Okay, and that happened a lot in history, by the way. And some of them actually tried to, one of the stories that one of the big scholars in Hanafi madhab, I think, he was following maybe Malik al-Shafi'i, and then his teachers told him like, You just there's no hope in you. Like, you're not gonna be able to seek knowledge. So he got so frustrated, he left him and he changed his madhab and he became a great scholar. Another madhab.
What if you're in the middle of the ibadah? Can you change the madhab?
Okay, I'm coming to that. So again, this question is generally following the madhab. I'm coming to the detailed one. Yeah.
Why not just embrace all of it? Why do you have to change?
Well, we're done with this premise. We said we didn't have to. Now we're talking about the options. Oh, okay. So again, you didn't have to. These are just options that we have. Okay, that's the question that you're asking about. Can I combine between two or more madhabs? I like your confidence, mashallah. Just give it a thought before. Okay, so how can I combine between two or three madhabs? Yeah, okay.
Isn't it sometimes kind of impossible because maybe some of the things like they contradict?
Sorry,
Like
say
if
that
one
again.
madhab something rules, but and another madhab it doesn't.
Yes.
Right. So like you can't combine everything from all of them. That's probably
You can or you can't?
You can't. 'Cause
Okay, so the answer to this is you can't.
that's why there's four, right? Or else they would have all been one. And I think you can take maybe bits and pieces.
So yeah, so the question of the combining between two madhabs or more because they have disagreements, they have differences of opinions, right? So sometimes you want, like the question you have, okay, I'm in ibadah, I want to change my madhab before this ibadah. So, okay.
No, sorry.
Okay, so the answer of this question, because we've taken so long time, the answer of this question is you need to differentiate between two things. Okay? Number one, there's something they call it the mixing between opinions. Or التلفيق بين الآراء. You mix between multiple opinions. If you want to mix between multiple opinions, generally, yes, you can, but with some conditions. So the main and the most important condition is that you cannot mix between multiple opinions in the same issue. Right? Like prayer, for example. So now I want to pray. And before prayer, I need to make wudu. Right? So if I want to make wudu and pray, I need to make sure that I'm consistent with my following of these opinions. Right? The very famous example is the nullifiers of the wudu. We have multiple disagreements on things that nullify your wudu. Right? Every madhab is lenient on one thing. You cannot just pick and choose between all these madhab and do all of these nullifiers. Right? Every single nullifier, one of the madhab said it's okay to do it. And you do them all and then you go pray. So one madhab said bleeding doesn't nullify wudu. Right? One madhab said touching private parts doesn't nullify the wudu. One madhab said touching the wife and the unmarriageable or the marriageable male or female does not nullify the wudu. So you do these three things and then you go pray. No, you cannot do this. Why? How can you decide this is acceptable or not? They say, okay, this scenario that you did, you basically imagine that you are presenting it to each school by itself. So if you present it to the Hanafi, you said, no, that's wrong. Right? If you present it to the Shafi'i, no, that's wrong. If you present to the Maliki, no, that's wrong. If you present to the Hanbali, you say, no, that's wrong. Why? Because everyone is missing one thing. So it's wrong. It's wrong according to all of them. You cannot do this. But the other scenario which is correct is that, okay, I pray according to Hanafi madhab, but I need to pay my zakah according to Hanbali madhab. I'm going to do something regarding my marriage and whatever a family matter through the Maliki madhab. It's up to you. You can pick and choose between the separate things as much as you can, because you don't have to follow a madhab. And they are authentic in general, and you can just follow their opinions. I'm talking about the main opinions of the madhab, the opinions that are well approved and certified by madhab. So you need to avoid that talfiq, that mixing between the madhab. That's why we usually get confused with the differences of opinions. Right? And now I want to know what is the fatwa on this issue. I get multiple opinions from scholars or mashayikh, and now I'm confused. Okay, if you know the opinion is authentically attributed to one of the madhab, you can follow it. But again, with this condition, do not combine in the same issue. And when it comes to marriage, for example, we had disagreement on the pillars of marriage. Right? Some of them said the dowry is not actually a pillar of marriage, but it's something important, but it's not a pillar. A pillar means if it doesn't exist, the zawaj is invalid. The marriage is invalid. Some of them said the witnesses is not a pillar. Some of them said the guardian and the wali is not a pillar. Right? And then somebody goes and marries without these three things. They didn't agree on a dowry. They didn't have witnesses. The woman doesn't have a wali, for example, or a guardian. So this zawaj is invalid according to all the schools of thought. Even though each one of them, yes, one of the madhab said no, it is not actually a pillar. Yeah, but the whole scenario that you made up is not actually accepted by all of them. And this comes the last point is what everybody of us does actually, the fatwa shopping, right? Ammu Google or Sheikh Google, that we just want to know what is the fatwa or the hukm of this thing. We open Google, right? We type in the search bar that what is the hukm of playing with dogs. Okay? Then 100 results would show up. So because we are very motivated to seek knowledge, just the first one, because we're lazy, you click on it, you scroll down, you do not even read the question. So, okay, let's count how many mistakes we do. So number one, you go to the first thing that comes up, the first result that comes up in the Google page, right? Click on it. Number two, you skip the question a lot of times and you read it. You can just look, oh, okay, dogs, okay, just go down, right? And then it's a long answer, even though like maybe 10, 15 lines, oh, that's very long to read. But just, okay, halal, okay, right? Or haram, okay. If halal, you're happy. If haram, I'm gonna go for another web page or a website, right? Because I'm looking for a halal thing. So you have a perceived idea in your mind that I want it to be halal, I want it to be haram, right? That happens a lot of time. We're human beings, that happens to us. But the problem is, we do not read the question, that's a big problem. We do not read the full answer, that's a big problem too. Because the question, maybe there is a certain condition that this person mentioned, right? Maybe he's living in a different country. Maybe he's living in a different community. Maybe he has a health condition. Maybe he has millions of reasons, right? And then the answer, the same thing. Maybe the answer that this sheikh gave as a fatwa is only applicable to that person. It's only applicable to these circumstances that you didn't bother to read, right? So this is one of the problems that we do. And again, this idea of preconceived notions that I want it to be halal, I want it to be haram, that's another bigger problem too. And it's a spiritual problem too, by the way. Because you do not have the true intention that I just want to know what does Islam say about this. You want to do something that goes with your own self-desires and whims, basically, right? So these problems we do a lot. We do not spend enough time to investigate. We do not spend enough time to ask even multiple resources sometimes. There are a lot of other things that I'll talk about in the future about there are etiquettes and adab and manners, how to seek fatwa and how to ask even scholars and how to interact with them to ask about fatwas, because there are other mistakes that we make that you go ask 4 or 5 imams, for example. That sometimes it could be okay, but in other situations it's not really a good thing to do. And what is actually more inappropriate that when you ask the first one, you ask the second one, you tell him, I've asked so and so and he told me that. That's not right. Right? You ask the sheikh, okay, you want to ask one more person, you can do this. That's your right. But you don't tell him, okay, I've asked the other sheikh and he said otherwise. Or he agreed with you. You do not have to say this, basically, right? Specifically if the 2 imams or the 2 sheikhs, they know each other, because sometimes that causes some problems, right? It's your right. Ask a million sheikhs and imams, that's fine. But you do not have to say, oh, I asked the person and he said that. Number one, you show kind of disrespect to the person. Okay, so why are you asking me? Whether you're showing disrespect to the person you're telling him or to the previous one that maybe you were not convinced with his answer, a lot of reasons for this. So there are a lot of etiquettes. The scholars wrote books about adab al-mufti wal-mustafti. They're the etiquettes and the manners of the mufti, the one who gives fatwas, and the people who are seeking these fatwas. But the main important issue, other than the etiquettes and the adab, is, again, try to avoid confusion. Try to spend some time on understanding the hukm or the fatwa or the article that you read. Generally, by default, Google is not a good source of fatwa. Just let's agree on this by default. It's not a reliable source of fatwas, right? You cannot just Google things. There are millions of factors that would affect this thing that you are reading. Starting from the website itself, from the name of the scholar or the mufti who is giving the fatwa himself, to all these details that we mentioned about this. So that's another factor too. So you need to do a little bit more proper investigation. And then we complain about confusion all the time, right? When it comes to religion, we do not take it as serious. And we just want the very to-go knowledge that is something very easy to take it, because we don't have enough time for this. Other problem, and conclude with this, other problem, not just on the fiqh issues, that sometimes it annoys me personally that the concept of the shubuhat or the misconceptions about Islam, right? There are people who don't want to bother themselves and they want to read or to know enough about the religion. Okay, that's fine. And then they spend all their life, they don't just bother to know about something about Quran, something about Hadith or Sunnah. Okay, that's fine. And then randomly on Facebook and WhatsApp message or in group, okay, there is so and so who is whatever a scholar in physics in UK somewhere, and he made this video and he's talking about Quran, and he said that there's contradiction in the Quran. So out of a sudden you will pass it on to a million people that you know, right? And you send it to all the groups and all the chats that you have, and you would post on Facebook, oh, I'm confused, right? I need someone to tell me what is the truth. I need someone to tell me why I'm confused. Why Islam is confusing me? Why the Quran is having all these contradictions? And you will send it to all the people that you know there might be more religious people, more practicing, have more knowledge. And then you convince yourself that you are so confused, right? And you convince others that they are confused and you try to make them confused too. But you didn't even bother to read a couple pages about this. And if a video or an article or a Facebook post would shake your beliefs, you have a problem with your belief, right? You don't have to have the answer, by the way. I'm not telling you need to have your answer by yourself. But if just a random post on social media will make you very hesitant about your beliefs, there is a big problem with your belief. There's another way you respond to this, that I don't know the answer, but I can get the answer. I can put some effort to do the answer. I can whether ask someone that I trust, or I can actually seek knowledge and know the answer. But just to be so hesitant and to be very confused, and I lost trust in all religious authorities and I don't know what to do, okay. And then you turn into these very deep comments and posts until whatever other things happen. You didn't even trust your own intellectual capacity by doing this, right? And that's a bad sign of your belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and your religion. And you do not expect the scholars or the local religious or imams or religious people or imams or whatever person that you trust to answer every single kind of misconception or shubha you get. Because I personally get this messages every single day. On WhatsApp, a lot of videos and articles, and people expecting to watch all these things and to read all these articles and just to provide answers for this. That's not a right way of understanding religion. And that's not a right way of actually responding to these misconceptions if they are really misconceptions. Right? If you live all your life just trying to understand what's going on with these misconceptions and these claims people say about Islam, that's not a healthy environment that you would put yourself in. So whether you seek knowledge in the proper way or you practice your religion, the bare minimum that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted you to do as a personal obligation, and inshallah you will be saved by this. But throwing yourself in the middle of confusion is a really bad thing. It's a spiritual disease and it's an intellectual disease too. So we need really to be careful with this. Apologize, we took longer than assigned, right? Sorry. So, Jazakumullah khair. Inshallah, next time we'll start with the principles of fiqh, talking about introduction to the principles of fiqh, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.